This is part 2 of the Organic Molecules Lab, and we just finished discussing methane being a nonpolar molecule. So if you look at oil, for example, this is just a long chain of hydrocarbons, basically carbons and hydrogens. So let me draw this. This is my long carbon chain. Every carbon needs 4 bonds, and they're attached to these hydrogens. So we add those in, and then dot, dot, dot. So using the same logic as from up here, this is a nonpolar compound. No electronegativity differences. You can't draw those arrows. You can't take the sum of those arrows. Can't assign poles. By definition, this is nonpolar. So now, but why does this layer separate from the water layer? Let us take this. Okay, let's bring it down here. Okay, so here's my piece of fat, of oil, and there is an oncoming water molecule. So let me draw in my partial negatives, my partial positives. So when this approaches, it's not actually going to have any interaction. This positive part, it's not attracted to anything on the oil because there's no, the negative part of the oxygen, there's no positive part for it to attract to. And similarly, there's no negative part for this to attract to. So what's going to happen is these waters won't associate with the oils because there's no attraction. Won't associate with oils. It would much rather prefer to associate with each other. So we'll associate or be attracted to other water molecules. To other water molecules. To other water molecules. And then these oils up here, these other pieces, they're kind of going to get put off into one area. They're going to get segregated with other similarly structured compounds, with other oils. And this is fine because they don't repel each other, so they're fine being next to each other. They don't repel each other. Because again, think of magnets. There's no negatives, no positives to cause attraction or repulsion for this nonpolar substances. But this is why you'll have oil in one layer and then water in another layer. They won't mix. There's no area for it to cause any attraction. Okay, so that takes care of carbohydrates. Next are lipids. And lipids is a general term for a couple types of molecules, but they're all generally not soluble in water. So the first type of lipid is something called a triglyceride. To make one, you have to take a molecule of something called glycerol. So this is glycerol. And this is going to come into contact with fatty acids. And 3 of them, up to 3. So 2 oxygens right there, and this is just a long hydrocarbon chain. Same thing here. Could be a little different, could be the same. And this here, these 3 fatty acids. 3 fatty acids. Now when they come together, you will have this structure. So there's my carbon backbone, and you kind of connect what you see on the left. Continues the chain, continues the chain, and there is my last fatty acid attached. Now we call this tri because there's 3 fatty acids, glyc, because of that glycerol backbone, triglyceride. Triglyceride. And this is also used to produce energy like glucose, but there is one main difference. So also used to produce energy, but the main difference is that we first use our glucose or glycogen stores, then we go on to fats. So let's say the body first uses glycogen and glucose, and then it uses these fats. Okay, and let me take this structure, take this guy, put it there. So just like from our oil molecule right here, this also contains 3 long chains of hydrocarbons. So here's a super long chain. There could be more. I'll put ... could be more. This is all the hydrocarbons. So again, these are non-polar regions. And since they're so large compared to those oxygens, we consider the entire molecule to be non-polar. So it makes entire molecule non-polar. And then you can see above, so why it won't mix with water. Okay, so we took care of triglycerides. Now let's talk about saturated and unsaturated fats. So there is my triglyceride. And then everywhere we have these kind of vertices, these are all carbon molecules. So carbon, 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 single bonded to each other. And since carbon needs 4 bonds, the other 2 come from hydrogens. So attached to every of these carbons will be 2 hydrogens. All the way down. So all the way down. So we can say that they're fully saturated, they're fully covered with hydrogens. Fully saturated with hydrogens. So this is why we call this a saturated fatty acid. And these structures are higher in energy than unsaturated fats, and this means they have more calories. More calories than unsaturated fats. Okay. Another key difference is that these are found in animals as opposed to plants. And last thing you'll need to know is that these guys are solids at room temperature. Because the other saturated fat molecules are able to bond with each other without much issue, with enough orientation to create a solid. Okay, now let's go on to a unsaturated fatty acid. So there is my molecule again. But for an unsaturated, we are going to have at least 1 double bond somewhere along this molecule. So let me take a close-up of this. When you have a carbon double bonded to each other, it still needs a 4th bond. That 4th bond again comes from hydrogen. But instead of 2, there's only 1. So these molecules are not fully saturated with hydrogens. That's why we call these unsaturated fats. And we can find these in plants. And these also contain less energy than saturated fats. which kind of translates to less calories. And then lastly, you can find these liquids. They're in a liquid form at room temperature. So if you think of, sunflower oil, corn oil, those are unsaturated fats. Okay, so now on to steroids. Now let me draw the structure for a steroid. One carbon ring, another hexagon carbon ring, another, and lastly this is a pentagon. Since it's just a hydrocarbon, this is a nonpolar, just hydrocarbons, just a bunch of hydrogens, and carbons put together. And then just like the examples from before, this makes it nonpolar. This is why this is considered a lipid. Nonpolar. And steroids have important functions, which we'll discuss later. If we were to add a OH group to this steroid, it turns it into another important molecule. So let me add that OH group. This turns it into something called cholesterol. And this is a main constituent of our cell membranes. So, constituent of our cell membranes. Okay, so now I will see you in the next video.